Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm really excited to be sharing my story as an Asian American. In honor of AAPI month, or Asian American Pacific Islander month, which is this month, the month of May, I wanted to share my story and talk about my experience growing up Asian American. I was inspired by Jen Im to do this video. She did the Asian American Pacific Islander tag. There was a tag created where there was a bunch of questions for people to answer, and I pulled a few of those questions. I'm not going to answer all of them because I also have my own things I want to talk about. I definitely think it's important to highlight stories like these because I know I'm not the only one to feel this way, and I know a lot of people have struggles with their cultural background or their cultural identity. So yeah, I just wanted to share my story today. Without further ado, let's get on to the video. So as I said, I'm going to be pulling some questions from the tag that Jen did. So the first question was, which ethnicity are you? I am half Japanese and half Chinese. So my dad is full Chinese. He is from China and he moved here when he was around like 25-ish, so mid-20s. And then my mom was born and raised in Japan. So she grew up there her whole life and then moved to America around her mid-20s as well. Another question from the tag is, what is the first experience where you felt that you were a minority or different from other kids? I can't really pinpoint what my exact first memory was, but I definitely had a few from my really early childhood years. I remember the first one being in kindergarten when I brought a home-cooked meal to school for lunch. And if you identify with a different cultural background, I know that a lot of people have this same kind of story where they bring a home-cooked meal from their culture and the other kids make fun of it, or the other kids just aren't familiar with it, so they make comments about it. So for me, I don't remember exactly what the exact dish was, but I'm pretty sure it was some sort of like stir-fried meat on top of rice or something with like stir-fried veggies on the side. And you know, that's not a typical American lunch that most kids will bring to school in kindergarten. Most kids bring their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or their chips and their ham sandwiches. So for me, it was perfectly natural to bring the lunch that I did because that was what I was grown up eating. Like, that's what I ate at home for lunch, that's what I ate at home for dinner. Like, yeah, I also enjoyed my PB&J sandwiches and hamburgers like any other kid did, but it was nothing out of the ordinary for me. So I was really surprised and taken aback when I brought my food to school and the other kids did not think it was normal. I just remember going to lunch, opening up my lunch bag, and it was a bento box where my stir-fried pork and the rice and stir-fried veggies were, and I was super excited to eat it. I opened up my bento box and I was about to devour it, and then the other kids were just like, "What's that smell?" I didn't think that they were talking about me, so I was like, I don't know, what's that smell? But then they looked over at my food and they're like, "Ew, Maylee, what are you eating?" And I know that they didn't mean any harm, like it was just something that they weren't familiar with seeing, but that really hurt my feelings. And more kids just start to circle around and be like, "Ew, what's that?" And I just remember feeling so much embarrassment and sadness because that was the first time I realized, oh, I'm different. As the years progressed, I got more comments just along the same lines. I even remember sometimes I would not even take my bento box out of the lunch bag because I knew that as soon as I did, people would say something. And on days that I didn't want to feel that embarrassed or didn't want to feel shamed, I just wouldn't open my lunchbox at all. And I just sat through the 15-20 minutes that was our lunch period and I didn't eat the lunch. Honestly, looking back, it breaks my heart because first of all, my mom put so much time, love, and energy into making those lunches, and nowadays I would gladly take that lunch. Like, I love Asian food now. And I loved Asian food then as well. It's just that I was fine with eating them at home, but I didn't want to eat it in front of my friends. And then, of course, I'm also sad looking back because I realized how much food I wasted, I guess, because I would just sit there and not eat it and then just throw it away. Like, there are so many people who would wish that they could have that food, and I feel guilty that I had just wasted it like that. And then I also remember, I think sometime in 3rd grade, there was just one particular day where I was not having a great day, and one kid's comment really stuck out to me. I was already having a bad day to begin with, so that really pushed me over my edge, and I went home and I just cried. I just remember going to my mom and saying, "Don't ever pack me this ever again. I only want to bring sandwiches and juice boxes and chips from now on. I remember going to the grocery store and just being like, I want to bring Lunchables. Like, don't buy that. I want to bring this. And from then on, I packed my lunch and made sure that the lunch that I brought was just like everyone else's. I wish I could go back and tell that little girl that it's okay she was different, that she should eat what she wants to eat. And I would also tell her that she would meet so many people as she got older that loved Asian food and that would bring the same kind of dishes. And so yeah, as I got older, when I went to middle school and high school, I just met more people and found more people who were like me. So I eventually got over that. Nowadays, I would happily bring the lunch that I would have brought in kindergarten, but it was definitely a struggle for me in elementary school. Another memory that I have where I realized I was different from the other kids was like around Christmas and Easter time, so those classic American holidays. I remember coming back from winter break in, I think it was like kindergarten or first grade, and all the kids were talking about the gifts they got, and particularly that their stockings got filled. Like, you know, around Christmas when you put your stocking above the fireplace and then it gets filled with like candy and stuff like that. So I remember the other kids talking about their stockings. So me, as my little kindergarten self, I hung up my stocking on top of the fireplace, and on Christmas morning I woke up and I was so excited to see my stocking. So I looked inside and there was nothing in it. And the reason for that is because my parents didn't know that that was a thing. Like, they didn't know that kids get their stockings filled because that's not a tradition that they celebrated in Japan and China. When I went back to school after winter break, I was just mad that my friends could talk about how their stockings got filled. And yes, I realize how privileged that sounds. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that I was mad I didn't get gifts. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. Please don't take it the wrong way. It was more that I was upset as a young girl that I wasn't able to celebrate these holidays the exact way that my friends were. So also, for example, like Easter, my friends' parents would put up these Easter egg hunts for their kids, and my friends would always talk about, you know, the week after Easter, they would come back to school and say, oh my gosh, the Easter Bunny came and we had this fun Easter egg hunt, and I didn't have that same experience to talk about. It feels silly to say now, but if I'm going to be completely honest, being a young girl and seeing my other friends able to celebrate these things, I was mad that my parents didn't know the right way to celebrate Christmas or the right way to celebrate Easter. I was mad that I, as a child, was having to tell them, like, this is how a normal family celebrates Christmas. It felt like I had to take on the responsibility, and for a young girl who just wanted to be able to enjoy the holidays and not think about her responsibility in it, that was really hard for me. Now, looking back, I couldn't give another care in the world. Holidays are so much more than the presents. It's about spending time with your family, but I guess you could understand that for me, as a young girl, all I wanted was to just experience the same thing that my friends were. I can only imagine what it was like for my parents, for them to see that I wasn't proud to be Asian American, that I was ashamed of my culture, embarrassed of my culture, that I was telling them, Mom, Dad, you aren't celebrating these holidays right, and that I was comparing them in a way to my friends' parents, because I feel like every parent tries to do the right thing. Every parent tries to make their kids' childhood as great as it can be. So I can't imagine for them to hear that I was mad at them because they didn't do things right. That must have hurt them, and I can only look back and be sorry about what I did. But for me as a young girl, I wasn't able to see that side. Now I'm glad I can, and I'm so appreciative of them, and I'm so proud of my culture, but it definitely took time to get there. Another question from the tag is, can you speak your language? As I said, I'm half Japanese and half Chinese, so there's two languages there. And sadly, no, I cannot speak my language fluently. I took Japanese when I was really young, even before kindergarten, I think like pre-K-ish. So I learned the language then, but over the years I didn't practice it, so I lost all of it. I can understand, I would say about like 25 to 30% of Japanese, so if someone were to speak to me, I could understand, but I have to respond back in English, and I can't read or write or anything. And then in terms of Mandarin, I took that in middle school and high school for my language requirement, but honestly, I just took it to pass the class. I just did what I had to do to pass the tests and quizzes, and I don't think I'm that good at it. I can get by like saying hi and like where's the bathroom and you know the necessary words you need to know to get by, but I definitely am no pro at it. That's something I kind of regret. I wish that I kept up with either the languages or both of the languages, because nowadays all I want to do is be able to communicate and talk with my extended family. Not being able to speak the language, it poses that language barrier, and I'm not able to talk to my grandparents or my aunts and uncles and just my extended family. But that's another thing, like a lot of people ask me, oh, if you're 50-50, like what language do you speak at home? And people are often surprised to hear that we don't speak either language at home, that we speak English at home. But as I was saying, I wish I had taken those classes more seriously when I was learning the languages, because if I was able to speak those languages fluently now, I think that would give me really great opportunities, but mostly it would just allow me to talk to my extended family. We visit my extended family every year, so every time we go over to Japan, we also stop by China afterwards because it's like a 3-hour flight there, and you know, you're already halfway around the world, so you might as well. But every time we go over there, I'm just so excited to share how my year has been and just talk with my extended family. But how it usually ends up going down is it'll be like me sitting here and my grandma sitting there, and my mom will be in the middle, and then I'll tell my mom like, hey mom, tell grandma this, and my grandma will just be right across from me, and my mom will translate, and then she'll say something back to my mom, and then my mom will translate back to me, and I'll be like, ah, yes. I bet my parents always get annoyed because they're having to be the translators. I mean, we get by. We've learned to be creative through sign language and trying to communicate non-verbally. I think that's another place where I kind of differ from my other Asian friends, because a lot of my Asian friends, they speak their parents' native language at home, so they're able to speak with their grandparents. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not too late. I'm planning on getting better at the language. I still have a foreign language requirement as a college student right now, so I'm definitely going to pursue one of the 2 languages. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. Now going back to my family life and my parents. So as I said, my mom was born and raised in Japan, and she moved here when she was in her mid-20s, and she came here for college. And then my dad, actually, he never thought or never planned that he would move to the US, let alone leave China at all. My dad grew up in a really poor area, and his family struggled to get by, and he actually had to flee here. Which is crazy to think about. So when he came to America, he barely had any money, he didn't speak a single word of English, and I just can't imagine how scary that was for him. Eventually, my parents met in college, and it's actually really funny how my parents met. They met at a college tennis court, so they're both going to college at the time, and first of all, neither of them played tennis, so I have no idea why they were there. But, you know, it was a nice sunny day, so my dad decided he wanted to go play tennis, so he went to the tennis court at his college, and my mom felt like playing tennis, even though neither of them really knew how to play. So, like, they weren't playing together, they were with their own separate groups, own separate friends. And what my parents say is apparently my mom's tennis ball went flying in my dad's direction, and then my dad picked it up and gave it back to her, and I guess it was love at first sight. They started dating, they eventually got married, had me and my brother, and since they moved here in their mid-20s and they learned the language after they moved here, they weren't that fluent in English when I was born and when they were raising me. I remember as I was learning English, they were learning English as well. If there was a word that they didn't know, sometimes I, as a really, really young kid, like 7, 8, would know the definition of a word that they didn't know. And it was just an interesting dynamic because whereas I saw all my friends, they were learning the language from their parents. So that was difficult at times. I remember there were times when I would bring home my English homework or my reading homework and they wouldn't be able to help with it. And I would come to school the next day and my friends would be talking about how their parents helped them with their homework. So that was another thing I just had to come to terms with, that I wouldn't be able to ask them for help in that department. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely got my fair share of help with my homework because my parents were killer at math. So they helped me with my math homework, which was nice. I just have all these memories of my dad as he was writing business emails. He'd be like, Maylee, what does this word mean? Or how do you spell this word? And at times, I would laugh and be like, I can't believe you don't know that word, Dad. But I also remember there were other times where I was frustrated, I guess, because I wish my parents knew the language well and that we could just be like any other quote-unquote normal American family and that they could speak the language fluently. I mean, nowadays their English is amazing. There are days where I ask them definitions of words, but you know, it took time to get there. We both learned the language at the same time. Another thing that was hard about that was I wasn't really exposed to the bigger English words or like, you know, a bigger vocabulary just being at home and talking with my parents. So my reading comprehension in elementary school and for most of middle school was not that good compared to my classmates. I always scored below average when it came to standardized tests for the reading section or the English section. I mean, even taking the SAT, that's the part that I scored the lowest at, so I had to put in extra work. I had to do outside tutoring to make sure that I was able to keep up with my academics, but I mean, here I am now, and I am honestly, looking back, I also kind of recognize that being in that situation where I wasn't able to ask for my parents' help on my reading homework, that just made me more independent, and that made me take matters into my own hands and go to my teacher's office hours or get tutoring or outside help and really advocate for myself because I knew that I wanted to be a strong student. So in order to get there, I had to find the resources that I needed to. I couldn't rely on my parents. And while that might have been hard in the moment, I look back and realize that it gave me the independence skills that I have now, and maybe without those situations, maybe I might take things for granted, or maybe I wouldn't be as willing to seek outside help if I'm stuck with a homework assignment or something. Let me see, I'm looking at the other questions that were on the tag. Oh, something that is not on the tag but I want to bring up is my name actually, because my name is not an American name, it's a Chinese name. So in case you didn't know, my name is Meili, and that's spelled M-E-I-L-I. I know it's very confusing, most people pronounce it incorrectly, so I get Miley a lot, I get Meili a lot, but yes, my name is Meili, and my dad is the one who named me that. Originally, I remember my mom said that she wanted to name me a name with an M, so something like Melissa or Melinda or something. I just remember that she wanted something that started with an M, and so my dad was like, let's name her Meili, and yeah, so my name is Meili now. It's kind of weird to say, I don't know, should I say this? I mean, I don't know, I don't want you guys, like, don't take this the wrong way, like what I'm about to say next, don't take this the wrong way. I just want to give some cultural context. I'm not trying to say anything about my parents, or I'm not trying to be bragging or anything, like, whatever, I'll just tell you. So my name actually has a meaning, and in Chinese it means beautiful. So yeah, that's really awkward to say because, you know, other people who speak Chinese, they immediately recognize the name because it's a word in Mandarin, and they always ask me like, oh, does your name mean beautiful? And it's always really awkward because I'm just like, yeah, it's something that I was born with the name. Like, I did not choose a name for myself, my dad chose the name. So it's always awkward when I say what my name means or when people ask me what it means. But yeah, I just thought I'd tell you for the cultural context. And then going back to the questions, for the question that I answered earlier about like when was the first time you realized you're different than others, I did also want to touch on the side of like when did I realize I looked different than others. I don't think I ever really struggled heavily with that I looked different than my white friends or my friends that had blonde hair or brown hair. Well, I had black hair. Like, that's never something that I was really bothered by, which I'm so thankful that it didn't really get to me because I know there are a lot of people who it is something that they struggled with, but I'm really fortunate to say that the community I've lived in has always been so accepting of my race. I live in Seattle, and Seattle is a very culturally diverse area. There is a really large Asian population here in Washington, and so growing up, I definitely met a lot of people who looked like me. And I think that that's what has brought me to where I am now. Now I am so proud to be called an Asian American. Something that I do realize I kind of have a little bit of a different situation than some of my other Asian friends is when I went to UCLA, which first of all, UCLA has a really large Asian population, and that was something that was really cool for me and really new for me. Like, people even joke that UCLA, the acronym stands for University of Caucasians Lost Among Asians, which, I mean, they're not wrong. So honestly, I was really surprised. Like, it took time to get used to seeing a lot of people who look just like me walking around the UCLA campus. And I think that's something that is kind of unique to my situation, because a lot of my other Asian friends at UCLA, when I told them like, oh my gosh, this is like so weird because I did not grow up like surrounded by a lot of people who looked like me just going to school. Like, as I said, Seattle has a pretty big Asian population, but going to school, I went to a small private middle school and a small private high school. So I was one of just a few Asians. The majority of the population was Caucasian in the schools that I went to, whereas my other Asian friends, they talked about how they went to really big public schools in middle school and high school. So there were a lot of like Asians in their middle and high school. So not having that experience and then going to college and suddenly being surrounded by so many people who came from similar backgrounds and shared similar traditions and that I could just relate with because we had this shared culture, that was a really eye-opening experience. Coming to fall quarter, I just remember thinking like, this is interesting, I've never had this before. So I think what allowed me and helped me accept my background is that, as well as maturing, getting older. With getting older, I just realized that there's so many other people like me and that I wasn't alone. You know, like watching other YouTubers talk about their experience, I realized, wow, I resonate so much with their stories. And talking with my other Asian friends, I realized that I was not the only one at all who had these feelings. And then also, as I got older, I am now able to look back in hindsight and see that I was just a little girl who really wanted to be like her friends, who wanted to have that normal, classic American experience that she saw her friends enjoying and that she saw in the American movies and TV shows. And not being able to have that, it just made me feel different. And it made me frustrated, it made me sad, it made me mad. And I think those are all completely normal feelings, especially for a young child. But now when I look back, I just wish I could tell that girl that she will meet so many people when she's older that are just like her, and that yes, in the moment it's really hard, but she'll look back and she'll be proud of where she came from. I really want to recognize that my parents also had to go through a lot. First of all, coming to a new country and having to get adjusted to everything that was new here. So yeah, that is the end of the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed hearing my stories and just hearing what it was like for me growing up as an Asian American. If you watching this are someone who has gone through or is going through something similar to what I shared, I just want you to know that my heart is with you and that I get where you're coming from. But I hope that this month, AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, yes, that is a really long abbreviation, but anyways, I hope this month and even beyond this month we can celebrate the different backgrounds and cultures that everyone has. And you know, it's just what makes us unique, it's what makes us diverse, and I am really proud to be Asian American. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe down below for more. I've been getting on my YouTube grind. My goal is to upload every Saturday, so definitely subscribe so you don't miss another video. If you're watching this and you found it helpful or you think someone else might find it helpful, I would love if you could share it. And yes, until the next video, I will see you guys later. Bye!